Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. And today we have Mr. Lance Cottrell. How are you, Lance?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good to be with you as well. And one of the things that I was always impressed with you about was your amazing models. That was your signature models over your right and left shoulder. So you've got to explain what's the story on those, because they're awesome.
It's funny, yeah. Everyone who, especially people who watch my videos, and I come on to do advising for them. It's often one of the first things they notice. They're these sculptures that I picked up at a couple of different comic book conventions, or fantasy sci-fi conventions. The fun thing is that they're made up of ordinary hardware. So like the spine of the dragon is actually the chain from a motorcycle, and the weird bug guy is made out of like welded together spoons and screws and nails and washers. So if you look closely, they're a lot of fun. I think everything around you should have a story. And so, all the objects behind me have some personal import, or were picked up in some interesting way.
So it looks like, over your right shoulder it's like a samurai, and then over the left shoulder it looks like a dragon, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. That one's a dragon. That one I sort of describe as like a alien cyber bug with a quando.
Cyberpunk.
Yeah. It's sort of insectoid. It has antennae. It's got a big bladed, horse chopper of some sort.
Maybe that's the next character you see after John Wick. You see for Keanu Reeves, he's going to come back as that character.
Yeah, that would be an interesting movie.
We'll be all queuing for it. No. So thanks for coming on the show. And I think I know we've been talking about coming on for a while. And I suppose the quick question is, where are you joining us from? I know the answer to this, and I'm quite jealous actually. Not that I drink, but sometimes I do. But.
Yeah, I'm coming to you from Sonoma County. So it's about an hour north of San Francisco, and one of the main wine regions in California. We're sort of the heart of Pinot Noir production, and I have my little Pinot Noir vineyard right outside the window.
I'm going to start sobbing now.
It was no accident that I moved here. I fell in love with wine, got passionate about it, and sort of had a long-range goal. I want to end up out there doing this thing, and worked out.
And what do you actually bottle it then and ship it and sell it down in?
So we mostly sell the grapes. We work with two neighbors, and over our 6 acres, we typically bring in maybe 18 tons of grapes. I take about 500
tons. Yeah. My God.
Or when I say I mean I hire people to do it. It's the royal we.
It's the royal we. Yeah. Charles, you don't need to come over to Sonoma County this time. Yeah,
exactly. No, but we take about 500 pounds, and actually, I have a little space for making wine off my garage, and we hand crush and punch down. And actually, just last weekend, we bottled 10 cases of Pinot Noir.
So obviously, I've been to Napa Valley, yeah, which I presume is close
next door. So the next valley over. So we're one valley to the west.
Yeah, so I remember me and my partner, we went up there, and I ended up driving actually, which was a silly idea. But then there was this kind of like, these stretch limos. There was these big stretch limos, and literally every single winery that we went to, this stretch limo would pull up behind us, and like about 20 people would pile out. And actually, as it got later and later, they would stumble out of the actual out of the stretch limo. And I was stone cold sober.
Yeah. I mean, they can be pretty funny. I mean, the one upside is at least they're not driving, but they can be a pretty rowdy crew. It turns out the secret is to learn to spit. So you can, you don't taste with the back of your throat or your esophagus. So you can get all of the experience of wine tasting without actually consuming, more than some de minimis amount.
So you see, I want to see in the future, the kind of like a bottle, some nice wine with Lance on the, like you could have your logo on there. Feel the boot. Feel the boot comes to wine, the wine world.
We actually do have a label. We call it Turkey Roost, because the turkeys used to roost in all the trees next to our property.
Oh, you do have a brand that you're using? Okay, cool.
Yeah, we're not for sale, because that's a legal nightmare to actually get all the permits and do all of that. So it's purely for personal consumption. But my sister-in-law did a very cool label for us.
All right.
Gotta make it look nice. You can gift it to people. Everyone gets impressed when you bring a bottle of your own wine.
Nice. Well, you see, when I'm next over in San Francisco, I'm going to sneak out the office and come up the, up and see you, and we can drink wine on your veranda or whatever.
You should definitely do that.
So there is, obviously this is now it's not the G&T sessions anymore. It's the I don't know, it's the wine sessions, we should call it, or the red wine sessions.
That's right. See, if I'd known we were going to go down this rabbit hole from the beginning, I would have had a glass with me.
Oh, here we go. Boom. So I know that one of the reasons I wanted you to come on as a guest, because I think, some of the work that you've been doing, some of the stuff that the gallivanting around that you do, for the people that do listen to this show, I think if they don't know about what you do already, they're going to know by the end of this episode. But for people that don't know Lance, I suppose, could you just do a quick intro, just explain a little bit of what gets you up in the morning and what's going on in Lance's world? Because I know the answer to this, but obviously other people don't know yet.
Sure. Would you like the whole history or just what's going on today?
I think this is what's going on today, because I think we'll jump back into that, because I think there is an origin story, I think, that kind of evolves from that and about where you got to today.
Yeah. So these days, what I'm really focused on and what I'm passionate about is working with early stage startup founders. So I've got a YouTube channel and a blog with advice on all kinds of topics. And then I do open office hours. So I'm working with them. I take on a few to be formal, on their formal advisory board on an ongoing basis. And I'm also a global entrepreneur in residence with the Founder Institute, which is an accelerator with offices all over the world. And so I'm active with several of those, including actually their London cohort.
Oh, that's good. No, we actually had a lady on the show a while ago from Berlin. I think she's involved in FI as well.
They've got hundreds of locations. So I usually do San Diego, San Francisco, Toronto, London, and Tunisia are the ones that I've gotten particularly active with.
Okay. That's an interesting collection.
It was sort of random. I didn't necessarily pick them, but people invited me to give talks there, and then I ended up getting more and more involved.
Well, you see, a few episodes ago, I was, we're talking to Chinoa Farmworth, who's actually the CEO of Blue Startups in Hawaii. So I was with her in September last year, about a year ago, and they've got the only kind of East meets West startup cohort over there. But it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, Hawaii. That's definitely a good location to go to.
It's been a while, but it's lovely. Yeah.
So I suppose, yeah. I mean, so that's kind of what you're doing today. I suppose and I suppose, what was the trigger for doing that? Is there a particular thing that happened in your journey that kind of thought, aha, light bulb moment that you wanted to do this? Because obviously it's a lot of work, it's a lot of sharing your knowledge and stuff like that. But what was the kind of thing that happened that made you do it?
So shortly after I exited my startup, I decided that I really liked that experience of being in that startup space. Things are so dynamic. It's exciting. Also, terrifying and existential dread continuously. But I wanted to keep
where is that wine bottle? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. But I decided, one way of getting involved with that was to do angel investing. And so right after I moved into this local area, I reached out to the local angel group, the North Bay Angels, started getting involved with them. And through them, I ended up being asked to join a mentoring group for local companies. Mm-hmm. And so I started to do that and discovered that I seemed to have a knack for it. People really appreciated the kind of advice and insight I was giving. And I loved it. I was having a great time. It was really interesting. It kept me engaged. I learned like crazy. I mean, that's one of the things I've discovered is teaching people teaches you probably more than you teach them, right? It puts you in that interesting headspace and exposes you to so many problems. But over time, I was frustrated by the tiny number of people that I could realistically help, meeting them in person and driving down and, having coffee. And so things started to move virtual, and even virtually it didn't scale. So that's when I started Feel the Boot, because I was also answering the same questions over and over again. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's some things that are unique to every company, but there's a lot of the information that you need as a founder that is more generic and sort of applies more or less across the board. So every time I'd sort of hear the same thing 2, 3, 4 times, I'd create a new episode around that and create a blog and a podcast. And, once you create content, you want to throw it out on all the different media. But that's how Feel the Boot came about, was really, how do I have more impact? And then, of course, it exposes me to more companies, which then brings more interesting founders to set up office hours with me. So it's this really virtuous circle.
And I suppose I've got to ask the question. So you call it Feel the Boot, which when I found out about it's called Feel the Boot, I smiled, right? So what's the story behind that? Because it's a great name.
Thank you. I spent a lot of time brainstorming on names, and it just seems like so many of these sort of startup ecosystem names get very generic. It's something Tech Accelerator, Star, whatever.
Oh, I see, right.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted something that was a little more idiosyncratic. And around that time, a couple of the people that I was advising that knew each other had spontaneously started calling me the Boot. And they'd say, "Oh, I need to talk to Lance. I need to get the boot again." And I think it's a motivating boot, but that just seemed like this kind of unique thing. So I leaned into it.
I thought you were going to say you got some like big boots or something like that. When you went to see these founders, oh, it's Lance with the big boots on.
No, but it's funny. The original logo was literally just a picture of one of my hiking boots on the floor.
I mean, I wasn't sure if actually what it was like the phrase about bootstrapped. When you do it without you're doing it kind of like running on fresh air, or you're running on fumes. I wasn't
absolutely.
Sure if that was the kind of the background to it.
Well, and the more I thought about it, the more kind of analogies there are. Bootstrapping is certainly a big piece of it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Also thinking about sort of, you're taking a long journey and you need to lace up your boots, and maybe have someone coming along on that hike with you. And so there's sort of a lot of other analogies that I thought sort of
put some provisions in the boot of the car.
That would be less comprehensible to the American audience.
But... Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry. what would you call? Come on, it's called. What's it
they
called?
Call it the trunk.
That's an elephant. That's an elephant. That's an elephant. The trunk.
Yeah, no, it's a big box thing. But now, of course, with my Tesla, I have both a trunk and a frunk.
A frunk? Is that what they call it?
Yeah, because there's storage in the front where the engine would be.
Oh, right.
So they literally call it a frunk.
They call it a frunk. Yeah, I mean, when I was in San Francisco last September, I went, and one of my friends has got a Tesla. We went out for some ramen or whatever, for lunch or whatever, and I couldn't believe the noise machine that they've got in those Teslas. He's got like a model whatever it is, and he's like pressing this button, and it's like it's like these different noise. I was like, it's like Elon. Is this typical Elon? It's like completely crazy.
I remember. I don't know if they still have it, but every seat has a weight detector to know if someone's in it, especially the passenger seat, to turn on and off the airbags. There's an option within the controls to make that do a whoopee cushion fart noise.
You just said what I was trying to avoid saying, but you obviously just said it. But yeah, that's what we're playing with the thing when we're driving down the highway, which is quite distracting for the driver.
Right. They should not let you do that while you're in motion.
Cool. So the I know if you go back from there, then I know that you have been a founder, though. You have been a operator of a startup, and I suppose, is that what you would say was your, I don't know, baptism of fire, or your kind of the way where you kind of learned it the hard way, and then your kind of thing you're doing now is giving back to those founders and helping them. I'm not saying fail, but navigate those kind of that jungle that you.
I try not to help them fail.
Yeah, it's probably note to self. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was funny. From very young age, I knew what I was going to do. I was going to be a physics professor.
Okay. I think they say airline pilot or something like that.
No, well, I mean, my father was a physics. Both of my parents were professors, but my dad was a physics professor. Mother was sociology, so I had kind of a balanced left-right brain upbringing. But physics just came naturally to me. I thought that was going to be the path of least resistance. Got my undergraduate degree in physics. Went into grad school in physics. Started working on my PhD. I was doing astrophysics. So I was studying.
Oh, wow.
Using the Hubble Space Telescope. Had just been launched at that time, and the big Keck telescopes had just come online in Hawaii. And so doing really interesting stuff in the very early universe. and then got interested in sort of privacy and cryptography and anonymity. And I could spend an hour talking about what was going on at that time and why that was interesting. But that became more interesting to me than the astronomy. And really, that's where the passion was. And then I remember the day that I realized I needed to start a company. This was an idea that had been in my head. I'd love to build a company around this. I'd love to be an entrepreneur. Not that I had any idea what that meant, right? I basically never held a real job.
I was going to say that entrepreneur phrase, was it even around then?
So this was 1995.
Okay.
So yes. Okay. But I mean, the World Wide Web had been in existence for 3 years. The internet had been around for a long time, but the web was still brand new.
Tim Berners-Lee's got a lot to answer for.
Yeah, exactly. Positive and negative. But in fact, that was what got me over the hump. Was an idea percolating, and then I was driving back from grad school one day, and there was a billboard by the side of the road, and it was for the local shopping mall. And usually it was someone's white sale or discount on plates or blankets or whatever thing that they were advertising. And one day it was just University Town Center, http://utc.com. Even though I'd been developing websites for a couple of years, I was super early on that, I had never seen a URL on a billboard. And it was just this road to Damascus, like, oh, it's arrived, and the window of opportunity for a business idiot astronomer to start a business and be successful is closing, and I should jump now.
And what was it? So were you the founder of that first company then? Did you come up with the idea and everything like that?
Absolutely. And a solo founder. It was just me.
All right.
Because I'd been doing privacy and cryptography and anonymity systems, that's where I went. I really wanted to make a commercial version of the open source tools that I'm building. Because the open source privacy community tended to be by geeks for geeks. The first step in using this tool was to compile it on your Linux workstation, which sort of ruled my mother out as a customer. And so,
or contribute to the code base or whatever. As we
right.
Now.
She was never gonna, check out any code.
Maybe she was doing it secretly. Maybe she was secretly coding when you went to sleep.
Must be. I don't know. But so I wanted to make it user friendly. I wanted to make it accessible. I wanted to make something that would actually have an impact on the world that people would want. And so launched that company, and it went through a number of sort of iterations and pivots until finally we settled on Anonymizer as a consumer web privacy tool as our primary product, and that ended up becoming fairly successful. And then we suffered through the .com collapse in 2000. We did what I call the cockroach strategy. They say they'll survive the nuclear fallout, so we survived that, managed to crawl out the other side.
It's not cockroaches now. It's supposed to be camels now, isn't it? It's like you're not a unicorn. You're supposed to be a camel. Be more camel.
Carry your water in you. Survive in the desert for a long time.
That's right.
I guess it's more. It sounds more positive than cockroach. Cockroach does not have the best. But
the best PR firm. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But we ended up, after 9/11, after the attacks on the Twin Towers, we pivoted to supporting the government. And we ended up actually and this was where we hit real success, was building platforms for conducting online undercover operations for the national security and intelligence communities.
All right.
And so that was super fun, really interesting stuff. By then, I was just doing the architecture on those things and designing the systems and laying out the cryptographic models and
stuff.
But
if you think about the stuff that you were working on then and the stuff that you were, originally doing the academic side on, fast forward to where we are today, cryptography, data privacy, it's all foundational stuff that we're still struggling with. And so, well, I don't know. I don't want to get into a tech titan bashing session, but there's some people that have kind of compromised that slightly. You could say, or taken advantage of this kind of free service versus data, giving you data and everything like that. But those topics are still very relevant today, aren't they? Incredibly relevant.
Really are. I mean, I think that a lot of the debates we had back then, we'd say, oh, people might do X, Y, and Z, and you'd had some debate on TV or on a forum, and somebody would go, "You're just being paranoid," and we weren't even close.
Yeah. You should
far
you
more
should
invasive.
you see if we'd had like the things like this. You see, we could have recorded those sessions, and then back then we were ahead of our time, or you were ahead of your time.
Exactly. Well, there's a mailing list that I was on back then called the Cypherpunks mailing list, and it was archived. So there's actually a ton of these discussions from back in the day among people who were trying to build open source tools in the 90s and worrying about these cryptography and privacy things. But it has become interesting. Not to go down this rabbit hole, but when I started, the web was pretty flat consumption. You went somewhere, maybe you could post something a little bit, but basically you're just reading content. And so we're worried about them tracking what you're reading. And then, as social media came out, suddenly it would be this thing. I want to be private on Facebook. And I'm like, I'm not even sure I understand what those words mean in that sentence.
It's an oxymoron.
It is. I want to put my life out on the internet for public consumption privately. And I can understand because I share that sort of desire, but it is, I don't know how you square that circle. That's a weird one.
Well, it's quite interesting. So I wasn't. I mean, I don't know if I've actually declared this actually. So I think it was 2018. So what's that? 5 years ago. I wasn't on Facebook until 2018. And then wow. I only actually ended up going on Facebook because there was there's a guy called Brian. I don't know if you've heard of this guy. There's a guy called Brian Rose. He does this thing called London Real. He went for he's an American guy, but he's a ex-banker. He's based in London now, and he's got this podcast show. He's interviewed like lots of very big guests, and I did a podcast boot camp with him for 6 weeks in London. And part of the thing you had to be is join this Facebook group. Otherwise, I would never even now be on Facebook, even though I've been in the tech industry for like donkey's years. But I don't know. I don't know if you've got the same view, but I have certain perspectives on certain of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So it's probably the 5 or 6 horsemen of the apocalypse now. As defined by Scott Galloway, the famous NYU Stern marketing professor.
Yeah,
Prof G, as he's called. Yeah. Well, maybe I should call you Prof L because you kind of pretty much professor, aren't you? Really, if you think
almost.
About it.
I never did. See, it's funny. I started the company with one of my less brilliant ideas was I was going to start this company and finish my PhD in my spare time.
Well, maybe it's time now. What about if you dust it down and go back and graduate?
So, I mean, you actually have to relearn all of the basics. So the credit you have for like the first 2 years of grad school coursework go away. And I've got to say, my advanced calculus and quantum mechanics are rusty at this point. It's been a long time. So it would be a huge lift. And even if I could pick up the data from my original thesis, which I don't even know if I could lay hands on anymore, it's now ancient history, right? Things have moved so far beyond that.
You have to redo all the research again, wouldn't you, I suppose?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think if I was going to try to do a PhD now, I'd probably do it more on either privacy or on entrepreneurship, do something more in business.
Yeah, I mean, there's a guy that I've been working with recently. He's actually did his degree, I think, in Germany, I think. And he did it actually I think he did a master's in entrepreneurship. So it's amazing how it's progressed these days. He's in his early mid-20s now, and it's actually a thing now. It's like a phenomenon that people.
Yeah, whereas that didn't exist back then. There was no class in being an entrepreneur. There, these accelerators and boot camps and things that exist to support them, like Feel the Boot. There was none of that back then, and so it was definitely just groping around blind. Fortunately, I was in a weird area that was sort of counter programming against the trends, right? Everyone else was building tools that invaded privacy to do ad supported tools. I'm trying to build privacy stuff. So I kind of had no competition for a long time while I could learn what the hell I was doing. Largely the hard way.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how we know when I joined the tech industry many decades ago, it was like it wasn't the sexy thing to do, and now it's obviously super sexy now and super magnetic. And if you're not a tech founder, then people are going, why are you not a tech founder, or why are you not a co-founder? I suppose that links to another question I've got for you actually. Have you got? I mean, I know you said you were a sole founder in your company. Have you got any perspective on Is it better to be a sole founder? Is it better to be a co-founder? I know that I was reading the section on the Noam Wasserman founder's dilemma, and there's a really interesting section about founding team. I don't know if you've ever read it, but
I haven't read that. I should.
any perspectives on that as from your travels?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a huge advantage to having a good co-founder that complements your skill set.
Hmm.
And there's nothing worse than having a bad co-founder that causes strife. Right.
Right.
So I see people like, I have to go find a co-founder. I'm like, if you can't find a good co-founder who complements you, don't find a bad one. Don't compromise on that. Just be a solo founder. Hire your first few people if you need to, outsource, bring in contractors. If you eventually find someone, that can be amazing. In fact, I had a bit of that experience 5 years in, and I'd taken some angel investment, maybe $1 million, $500,000 by then. The board of directors came to me and said, you still really don't know business very well. I think you should bring in someone who actually has a business background and has been an executive and understands management better than you do. To be, and
was that the motivational pep talk they were giving you then? That kind of.
Well, sort of. I mean, it was kind of, we think you need to do this. Now, they couldn't really force me. I still had
control,
very thorough control. But I decided to take and I think I've actually done a whole episode on this, grab the initiative, and I started the recruitment process. I found the people, I interviewed the people, and I ended up hiring a guy that I slotted in as CEO. So I became chairman and CTO at that point.
Okay.
But I could make sure it was someone who we could work well together. We had very complementary skill sets. There was a huge amount of mutual respect. I think I test drove him for 4 months. Well, we mutually test drove each other for 4 months to make sure that this was...
Yeah, it should be two-way, shouldn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. He wants to look under the hood a little bit and make sure I'm not just blowing smoke, and that I can, in fact, defer to someone, right? Because a lot of founders have a hard time letting go of that absolute authority. And I wanted to make sure
delegating and trusting, you mean, that kind of
delegating and trusting, and as CEO is the right role I was giving him. There are a lot of decisions, operational decisions I had to let him make, right? If I'm chairman, I'm making strategic decisions. As CTO, I'm implementing stuff and working with customers, but I'm giving him that middle position, and he needs to know I'm willing to actually let him have it.
So giving him the mandate and the power and the decision-making criteria.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think in general, that's a lot of any delegation. But yeah, when you hand someone something, you've got to trust them. And a lot of founders have a very hard time letting go of that control of their baby.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? I've got a perspective on it as well, but I just want to understand yours as well. I
mean, one is, by the time you get to that point, this is your baby, right? You have just... It was like Zeus, like Athena from Zeus, born from your head. You've created this thing, you've nurtured it, you've sweat blood on it. It is deeply tied to your personal identity at this point. And you have very strong opinions how things should be done. And if you're bringing in someone in this kind of role, it's probably because other people think that maybe you don't have the best ideas about some of this, and you should be, in fact, listening to some other people. And there's some ego sometimes. I think you need, as a manager, you should be checking your ego at the door, right? You should be happy to hire people smarter than you and listen to them and take advice. But a lot of people have a hard time with that. I think a lot of founders, especially technical founders, are a little on the spectrum sometimes, right? They're a little neurodivergent. They have a harder time with that. The human side of things is not necessarily...
you mean like the IQ, EQ kind of?
Yeah, exactly. And the EQ side is what helps you with that aspect of things.
Yeah. I can corroborate that. I mean, there's some brilliant founders that I've met and worked with, and extremely high IQ, but the whole people dimension is a real struggle for them. And especially when they come across scenarios that they haven't been exposed to before. They just don't know they just really struggle, and they don't know how to treat it. I don't know, is it empathy? Is it just really being confident? Is it, Is it knowing what to say, knowing what to do? What's it's that kind of that I would say do the right thing,
Yeah.
and
I think it's probably all of those things, right? I mean, part of the reason you get defensive is probably feelings of imposter syndrome. And when you're being asked to bring in someone in that kind of position, I think it just, especially if it's forced on you, it really amps up the imposter syndrome. And I always really tried to watch for that in myself. It was something that I was concerned about. So I was always trying to kind of repeat that mantra of, okay, what does the business need, not what do I want? And,
right.
knowing what I don't know. Unfortunately, there's a lot that I don't know, so I get exposed to that frequently.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating topic. That I'd highly recommend that. It's a bit like like Clayton Christensen, the innovator's dilemma. It's kind of like it's the Noam Wasserman. I think he's a professor. I think he's a professor actually at some of the business schools in the US. I don't know if it's Stanford or something, but he's definitely worth reading.
I'll check that out. Put it on my shelf. My shelf keeps growing faster than I reduce it.
Same here. But he's also got another book. I think his second book is called Life is a Startup, which I think you might have heard as well, which is really good as well. So it's that's kind of like mapping the startup journey to people's lives, which more and more people can relate to these days. So yeah, I think so. Given what you've been through, what's your perspective on things today? Then, is it still? Sounds like you're trying to give back, you're trying to help these founders that you're working with. Are you still inspired by the vibrancy of that whole area, that kind of startup feel, that people come up with ideas, people like trying to put their cape on and their pants outside their trousers and be that Supergirl, Superman? Is that what you get the good vibe from, that kind of keeps you going?
I do, and it's not all of them, for sure, right? There's certainly a lot of startups that feel extremely derivative. Right now, for example, like blockchain ones, or we're taking an off-the-shelf language learning model and shoving it into whatever flavor of the day thing. Those get kind of boring. And I'm not interested by founders who are founding a company to make money, right? I want to found a company because I want to be rich. I want to talk to people who want to found a company because they are desperate to address some issue, solve some problem, and often something they've experienced, and that's what's driving them. And it would be nice if they make money. To begin with, given the odds with startups, if you're starting it to make money, that's a really bad plan, because the odds are you're actually going to lose all your money in the process of doing this. And then a tiny fraction of people both have a good idea, have the right timing, are smart, work their ass off, and then are lucky. And I think a lot of people, especially you'll see exited founders who get really cocky about things, and you just can't overestimate the importance of luck in all of this. I look back on our journey, and the number of times that we were almost utterly destroyed and just escaped it by a hair's breadth is not countable on two hands. Right.
Wow.
And each one of those,
probably, 2 hands and 2 feet, you mean? Is that what you're saying?
Something like that. And each one of those, the odds of total destruction were high. Around the .com collapse, we spent, I think, something like about 18 months with less than 30 days working capital in the bank.
Right.
And because there were no other options. If you're not alive, you can't survive on the other end, and so you just had to crank down. And those were brutal learning conditions, but it's where you earn all the gray hair, and gives you a very relaxed attitude towards things that other people think should be stressful.
Yeah, I suppose it gets you to focus on what's absolutely essential and what's like complete fluff and stuff the waste that you need to get rid of. But it sounds like your alignment, or your kind of synergy is with people that have got that want to make a real impact. They want to really change something they've seen, they've experienced. Because I think
impact matters, and the unique insight. I want to hear that there's something that they understand about the space, about the opportunity, about the competition, about the way people do things, that allows them to look at this in a different way and see a huge opportunity that other people are missing. And that's the kind of thing that excites me. And sometimes it's in very mundane businesses. One of the companies I invested in makes smart sprinklers for lawns.
Oh, you mean like robot sprinklers kind of thing? Is it?
Yeah. And it uses some inkjet printer sort of underlying technologies. But the way they understood how it could help, the impact on the economy, the synergy between their business, the irrigation contractors and installers, and the customers, and how their approach aligned everyone's interests to make a sort of 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 kind of connection. That's what excited me about it. Was they really understood.
So they kind of researched the market a lot, researched the customer need, the pain. That's what kind of, the classic, it's that kind of classic, what's he called? There's 3 steps to epiphany. Steve, God, what's he called? The guy that says about get out of the office.
Yeah, I can't remember what they are though.
But it's it's that thing about getting really in the walking in the shoes of the customer. I suppose it's that kind of thing, isn't it? I suppose that's what you
exactly. Yeah, I mean, this is something that comes up a lot in the advising. Is I'll have someone and they've half built the product. Is like, how many customer interviews have you done? Well, I've talked to 2. You need to stop coding right now and go talk to 20 more in depth, and really dig into what do they need, what are their problems, how do they measure success, what kind of pricing structures. One of the things I really harp on is founders tend to want to hear good news. So the question they ask is, would you want this? Would you buy this? Whereas they really should be asking, what would cause you to not buy it? What would you be concerned about that would make you hesitate? All of those sort of negatives.
Yeah, negative selling, basically. Yeah,
exactly. Which allows you to then architect around it. Okay, now I know what objections I will get when I finally have this done. Let me build it so that I already have the answer in place. Or, even in the first contact, I've already answered that for them, so it's not even on the table. They don't, you cut that off at the pass.
I think that's a trap, isn't it? You can fall into the kind of situation where you make an assumptive close and a positive assumptive close, rather than actually using that negative selling technique is actually gold. That's where you find the gold.
Exactly. And in this case, it's even pre-selling, right? You're not even selling anything yet. You're just having sort of developmental conversations. But
it's not available. It's not available. You join a wait list.
Well, precisely. And actually that helps, right? You've now got them interested. You've got them excited. You've been talking to them. They're not going to be a cold outreach when you finally get there. But I can't tell you how many founders I talked to who've gone out, interviewed people. They said, would this be something you'd want to have? Like, yes. Okay, we built it. Okay, I built it. Will you buy it? No. For these 5 reasons. And I was like,
right. Yeah.
You should have explored that.
What's your view? I suppose linked to that is because obviously there's all about this thing about runway and capitalization and any perspectives on the whole VC, how do you fund your startup? How do you believe in this whole VC raising money, or do you think there should be another model? I've got a perspective on this as well, which I'll talk about. But
yeah, I think that there are some business models for which venture capital is the correct answer, and it's few. I mean, if we look at sort of the world of successful businesses, if you just wanted to be an entrepreneur and start a business, it can't be more than 1% of all businesses that are even angel investable, right? Because, you could start a restaurant or a legal firm or, a construction company, but none of those are going to grow by, are going to do the triple, double kind of growth curve over the first 5 years, and then lead to an exit at some gigantic multiple. It's just not the kind of business they are. There's no way they're going to do that. And so they're instantly not candidates for that.
Right. Yeah.
And especially when you're looking at the venture capital side of things, there needs to be a case to be made that you must grow that fast to be successful, right? If your strategy requires that you own the market because your only defense is network effects, or your only defense is economies of scale, then you can make the argument
getting to scale as fast as possible.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. We have to be the gorilla in the room, the elephant within 3 years, or a competitor that's well funded is going to come in and take that.
But do you think
position and kill me.
Is that fuel? Do you think there's a lot of is there a hype cycle there? Is there a manifestation of all the stuff that's put out by VCs to stimulate the market? Is there a manifestation of the founders assume that that's the business model? Yeah, that thou shalt take many zillion, trillion, billion of funding. It's also becomes a badge of honor. Yeah, when founders get together. Oh, my seed round was this, and my Series A was this, and blah blah blah.
For sure, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why most founders come to me when they're looking for funding and having difficulty getting it, because that's what you hear about. That's what the hype cycle is. That's what you see in online sort of entrepreneurial boards, or when they're interviewing some successful founder. It's all about those kind of metrics.
Optics. Yeah.
And we just came out of a big hype cycle where getting funding was relatively easy, and a lot of VCs were throwing money at bad ideas, and so runway and profitability weren't that important. Then you have the reversal of the cycle, and suddenly everyone's way more focused on business viability and the ability to reach break even and survive. And I want to see that your business model
be more camel. Yeah.
Be more camel. Yeah. Do your unit economics work. And
be more cockroach.com.
Exactly. So you're looking for those things. And I remember in 2000 looking around at the deals that were getting done, because that was another huge bubble, and you knew it was a bubble because it was just stupid. You'd hear someone go, I just got $20 million for this really bad idea. It's like, okay. We took in lifetime $2.5 million in funding.
Oh, really? Wow.
And we had a very nice exit. Everyone did very well. We were no unicorn at exit, but we also had almost no dilution, right? So it was a very good outcome.
Yeah, so your cap table wasn't kind of sabotaged or kind of massively not in the place it needs to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually did a whole episode of Feel the Boot on the mechanism by which venture capital destroys companies.
You'll have to give us a link to that so we can put that in the publish the episode. It's interesting. So I got involved in my first Silicon Valley extravaganza was where we actually put our own money in, and then we kind of we basically used customer funders, so we kind of didn't take any VC, although VCs were throwing lots of money around. And that it was very hard, but it actually proved to be a successful formula. And that was pre-unicorns being described by Aileen Lee. So it was before 2013, 10 years ago. But I think that's the thing I've noticed is that, there's a lot more VCs in the market. There's a lot more saturation. It's now a lot sexier. There's a lot more people coming straight out of grad school or, doing their PhDs or MBAs and then going straight into that. It's like, I remember seeing that thing in the London's Financial Times. It was like, you come out, do you do Goldman Sachs or you do Google? It was literally that kind of like crossroads decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly you do see a lot of people going into it because it's the cool thing to do, and they don't necessarily understand a problem. It's one of these classic sort of solution in search of a problem or founder in search of a problem. Like, I want to do a startup, therefore let me try to work out what to do a startup on, which tends to produce bad startups, right? As opposed to you already understand some problem because you've seen it in some other context, and therefore you're trying to solve that. I think I do get frustrated with a lot of those where, you start digging on, who the customer is, and there's just not a lot there. So I actually really enjoy working with a lot of the older founders. So I certainly enjoy working with, the 20-somethings, but the 40 or 50-somethings are often really interesting because they've got some deep experience in the thing that they're doing.
Mm. I mean, I forgot to ask actually, when we're talking about that founder mix as well, was do you if you've got multiple founders, do you believe how do you if you're a founder, maybe you're a technical founder or maybe you're a business founder, and you want to find that other that kind of other part of the marriage or whatever you want to call it. How have you found out an effective way of them, selecting, or is there a process or a set of things that they go through that you found most effective from what you've observed, or is it still a bit of a dark art?
It is networking. It always comes down to that. It's how many people you get introduced to. How do you find the right person? Right, the right person probably isn't looking in the want ads. They're employed or doing other interesting things, and so just putting it out there into the universe continuously, and I believe in it absolutely indiscriminately. Like, my wife is an author, and she was looking for to talk to some agents. And we were out wine tasting one day, shocking. And we were talking to the woman who was pouring wine for us, right? She's just the server. And we were mentioning that, Barb's this author and looking for an agent. She's like, oh, one of my best friends from, I think it was college, is this really well-known agent. Let me make an introduction.
Oh, wow.
You just never know, right? And so you want to reach out to everyone. When I was hiring Bill, my CEO, I reached out to everyone I knew to see, who knows someone who has this skill set. And I had a fairly detailed description of the kind of person I wanted to hire, the kind of skill set, the kind of background. And almost all of them.
There's nothing like a warm referral, I suppose. That's what you're kind of saying. That's because that's the kind of the
Exactly.
kind of the number of degrees of separation. That's kind of a powerful.
Right. Well, and always asking for, if you don't know, do you know someone who knows? That's kind of a powerful thing that gives you that. But it's also if you happen to be connected to a super connector. So I ended up, the guy who was gold was my commercial real estate agent, and he represented on the renter side most of the high tech companies in San Diego, which is where I was at the time.
Okay.
And so he was in and out of the C-suites of all of the tech companies in San Diego. So when I sent him this thing, I think 48 hours later, I had 6 amazing resumes on my desk. One of whom ended up being Bill, who I hired. And
who were the tech? I mean, San Diego. I mean, I know that I remember Teradata's there, but who else is down in San Diego?
Qualcomm's there.
Oh, Qualcomm. Okay, yeah.
There's some big systems. There's some big government contractors that are down there. SAIC, I think, was in San Diego. There's a lot of biotech in San Diego. There's a lot of big universities.
It's a nice place. It's a very nice place.
Yeah. You got USD, UCSD, and San Diego State all there. You've got the big military presence. You've got the huge biotech corridor. Then you've got the telecom, because Qualcomm started there. And so, there's actually a surprisingly robust.
So Qualcomm, the guy, the ones that do the fabs and the chips and everything like that for.
The cell phone chips and whatnot.
Okay.
And they're a huge presence up there. But so there's a fairly substantial tech community. Now, Bill, who I hired, didn't come out of a particularly high tech company. He came out of more of a consumer goods company. But, he's Wharton MBA and had a ton of experience in senior executive and CEO kind of roles, which was very complimentary, because we didn't need someone with a whole lot of tech insight and knowledge. I could bring that. And, together it was, a huge multiplier effect.
So I suppose, what's your view on the characteristics of an ideal CEO then? Because I've got a definition, maybe. And then I'll let you speak, and then I'll tell you what my definition is. Or quite a good definition that I've heard multiple times that I think is quite useful. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly that sort of servant leader approach. I think the main job of anyone in a leadership role is to enable everyone else to do their job, and to provide sort of the guiding vision for the company. Although, interestingly, in our company, I provided the guiding vision for the company, but he had far more sort of operational and management experience on how to actually implement that kind of thing. I think the ability to have laser focus and commitment to a direction right up until the moment that you pivot and completely abandon it is an interesting psychological paradox that is critical to the success, right? You need to be able to be all in and then realize, but you're watching and then say, okay, we need to shift directions. You need to have strong convictions held loosely. And that's not everyone that really does that well.
That makes me feel like listening to watching Zulu, like Rorke's Drift, where they've got all the, they're in that Africa and there's like that British the British short and they're going hold, and then they shoot. A bit like holding your nerve until you actually have to do something.
That's right. But yeah, staying with your direction, you're going to, stay the course until you're like, okay, everyone out of the trench and flank them now. It's the new opportunities come up. I mean, we certainly had that big pivot and we sort of put our toes in the water. So like when we started working with the government, we stayed focused on the consumer, but we spun up a little side project to examine what that government space was like and understand those customers a little bit. And then once we started to understand, it's not just that we think the grass is greener. There's a lot of more greener grass over there. And, started to then reallocate resources and pivot the company. And within, I don't know, a couple of years, government was 95% of our revenues.
Wow.
I mean, it just took off.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of the definition that I got of a CEO, which is a bit more meta level, is about strategy, resource allocation, so where you invest the resources and I suppose the cash and the people, and then talent management. Those were the kind of three areas that I kind of heard that definition multiple times. I thought that was quite a good rounded three-dimensional model, you could say, about how we getting clarity on the strategy and then also working out how you can execute on that strategy. And to the point you said about being that Sherpa, that guiding light. How do you enable the organization to execute through attracting and retaining and developing great people?
I think the CEO exemplifies sort of the end point of the working on the business versus in the business. And by the time you get to the CEO position, you are 100% working on the business. It's about creating the structures. It's about creating, the incentives and the plans and that involves people and all of those things versus doing, right? At the end of the day, the CEO should be hands-on with nothing, effectively.
I mean, I suppose it depends at what stage you're at, because obviously some CEOs you have to be more hands-on.
Sure, I think
it needs to evolve, and you're correct. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, when you're doing early stages of a startup, you're CEO, but you're also janitor. You switch hats back and forth. But
yeah, I mean, what my experience is, because I worked in corporates and I worked in startups, some startups in corporates, like an entrepreneur, creating business units in telecoms and financial services, and then I worked in startups as well. So it's interesting when you build up all this tacit knowledge that you don't realize that you actually it's like acting as osmosis. You're kind of like taking it all in, and then when you get into a future situation, you go, I think I know what the answer may be, possibly.
Well, I mean, that is the
not
gray hair
always,
advantage.
but not always. But that's when the third eye comes out sometimes.
Yeah, that's the advantage of the gray hair at some level is you've seen something that is similar before, maybe several times, and run it a couple of different ways. And so
you see, Lance, I have to shave regularly, because otherwise I'll be look like Father Christmas. mine would go all white. Whoosh.
It's getting white-ish. We're getting there.
No, you're looking good. I'm kind of like, I don't know. I've been going this color for too long. Anyway, so I suppose one of the things I was going to say, what are you most grateful for?
God, there's a long list. It's funny. I think it's in some ways one of many, but it's the random chance job that I had in high school. Most of my friends were working in fast food and flipping burgers, or they were bad jobs. And I ended up, through a family connection, working at our local science museum.
All right.
And my job was what they called a facilitator. And so I was one of the people who'd walk around on the floor of the science museum to help people get more out of it, right? So they're not just kind of staring at something, but, okay, what is this trying to show? What does it explain? And that beats the hell out of a hot, greasy place flipping burgers. And I didn't realize until many years later that one of the things it did was I spent all of my time walking up to strangers, rapidly assessing at what level they were able to understand the thing in front of them, and then explaining it to them in a way that would engage them and interest them.
Right.
And we also did live demos, so I did a lot of public speaking. And in retrospect, those two skills have just turned out to be so core to so much of what I've done, right? The ability to go in and with customers, and this is the classic tech founder problem, is usually they want to go in and tell you all the fancy details of the thing they've built. And that's not what the customer wants to hear about. And very early, I was able to sort of wrap my head around that and communicate these things, clearly. Actually, even after.
Well, that's like the thing about, they don't care about your journey. They don't care about the product. They care about their problem.
It's all about the benefits. All about the benefits. I feel like a broken record. I should get a little button for my Zoom calls that throws that up on the screen.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So what you're saying is that experience actually give you some foundational aspects that you kind of like built upon and now you use them as some of your superpowers.
In retrospect, that was amazing. It's just one of these, think about just random chance, like being an astronomer in San Diego. The internet was just happening, and the internet was going to be this enormous thing. Well, San Diego's supercomputer center was one of the top 4-5 nodes on the internet at the time. It was
wow.
Really one of the big hubs on the internet. Remember, this was back when the backbone was 56K.
Wow.
Wrap your head around that, and rapidly expanded. But so I had an Ethernet connection on my desktop Unix workstation directly to the San Diego Supercomputer Center and to the rest of the internet. We were building websites because CERN was a physics department group, and that's where the web came from. And so I had access to and direct ability to work with this stuff super early on. And so I had insight into a lot of those things. I knew how to set up networks. I knew how to build these things in a way that not many people had opportunity to have. I had a supportive family at the right time, and supportive wife who was willing to let me jump out in the wild blue yonder and do this project. And I think anyone who gets too hung up on being self-made or having sort of created all of their own opportunities is deluded, I think is the word I want to use.
I was wondering what you were going to say then.
Yeah, there's so many ways in which, when you get to a place where I am and have had, been blessed with the sort of success that I've had, you should be overflowing with gratitude for the opportunities and advantages that you've had. People get really torqued up about the phrase "check your privilege," and I think they think it means that, oh, you had these huge opportunities. And I managed to avoid having a boot on my neck in so many different ways, right? I didn't have huge systematic disadvantages that I needed to overcome. I'm a tall American male with a good education. That gives you a whole lot of advantages to start with.
That's cool. That's cool. On the converse of that, then I suppose what given what you're doing today, what are you most excited about?
So, I'm really enjoying seeing and working with the underappreciated founders, either sort of gender, race, background, geography, sector, because there's definitely a herd mentality to a lot of Silicon Valley, right? We see the same kind of people getting backed, and they tend to have the same background. You know, you come out of Stanford, and you've got
Right.
buds who are in some other startup, and you know, it's all very incestuous. And so it's the person coming out of, you know, Montana, or, you know, the person who came out of a junior college but has got work experience, or, you know, these people who don't fit that Silicon Valley mold, but have that spark of the idea, the impact, the mission that
You've
they
got that
want to
inner
accomplish.
kind of fire and steel. Yeah,
Exactly. And that's the stuff that really lights me up.
inspires.
Yeah, and when I get one of those on my office hours, it definitely makes the day worthwhile.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I think because it's becoming, yeah, I mean, it's spreading out across the segments, it's getting more diverse. Yeah, the founders are getting more diverse, and obviously there's, you know, I mean, I've been working.
Bit. If you look at the numbers, it's not as much as you'd like to think.
Well, no, I was speaking to the CEO of, obviously a female CEO and founder, and, you know, but actually she was saying the other week that actually the stats have gone backwards. You know, there's all this kind of PR around it's going the right way, but it's actually going backwards. So there is still a lot of things to do on that. So yeah, there's still work to do. So one of the things that we do, I mean, in this is you know, to wrap up the episode, is basically we ask the question around what I call pearls of wisdom, yeah, golden nuggets, value bombs. So, you know, given what you've been through in your journey and all the stuff that you've put out on the internet, and with the stuff you've shared, what would be some takeaways that you could share with the audience today that you think would be, you know, thought provoking and something that they should really consider, you know, as they go forward in their journey?
First off, I think, and maybe my science background comes into this, but taking an experimental mindset to things, right? I mean, people will jump in and say, we're going to do this, and I'm confident that this is going to be successful. And I've developed a lot of humility by being really wrong enough times that I believe in tests, right? So you think this is going to be the right marketing model. Well, you know, how do you spend $20 testing that? You think this is going to be the right city to live in? Like, you know, we were looking at climate change and political change and thinking about potentially moving to other countries at some point. So we subscribe to the local newspapers there because I know that everyone's got their own brain damage and it looks great from over here. How do I test that? How do I do an experiment? Before I moved here to Sonoma, we got a vacation house, and we actually, even before we got the vacation house, we spent several multi-week trips to make sure that we could be controlled in such a ridiculously hedonistic environment, right? Could we not eat out every night? Could we, you know, cook home dinners, even though there's this amazing food next door? Can we not spend all of our time drinking wine and actually get real work done? I have humility about that. Turns out we could, and so we're really enjoying that. But sort of in real life and in work and in business, yeah, thinking about how do I test the assumptions. And from startups, that's one of the things I talk about the most is validating and testing assumptions. We talked about that early, right? Don't build the thing until you know the customer wants it. As soon as you can, right? The MVP model, get it out in front of customers and see if they engage with it. You know, understand how that sales cycle works. Test your pricing, test your marketing messaging. You know, all of those things need to be experimented on to get to the right place. My navel is filled with lint, not good answers. You know.
So what would be any more thoughts on that? Any other big nuggets you want to share? I mean, that's a great. I think it's a great one to kick off with.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole thing about convictions and, you know, having that real focus, but being willing to be wrong and being open to being wrong, I think is one of those things that ability to change your mind, to recognize when new data comes along or a better perspective comes along. You don't have to be the source of all the good ideas. Right. And you kind of want to be surrounding yourself with people and creating a culture where that's okay. And culture is a huge one. And it's one of those words that's real buzzy. But I remember one of the biggest problems I had was getting the truth from people, right? The higher you are in an organization, the larger the organization is, the less people want to give bad news to the
Right.
CEO or to the chairman
The
of the
founders.
board.
Yeah.
And just the endless work of making people feel safe. If I'm giving any kind of negative feedback, it's never,
Psychological safety kind of thing.
exactly. You watch something like The Apprentice or one of these shows, and they're ranting at people and yelling at them, and there's a lot of that picture of that's what a boss is. My experience is, if you've got good people, the problem is keeping them from flagellating themselves into a useless place. So it's always, how much heat can I take off this to keep them from going into this, brutalizing themselves cycle. You still want them to take the feedback and do the advice, but making a situation where they're not going to get beat up. It's okay to take responsibility and make a mistake and then admit to the mistake early, or share drafts of things. I mean, I remember just how hard it was to convince like people in the marketing department to show me the crappy early version, because it will be safe. I know it's a crappy early version. I'm not going to give you feedback on that. But I don't want you to spend all the time to build a beautiful wrong version.
Polishing, and then
Well, in particular, what I don't want to do is have someone spend a week making something beautiful that was wrong, and they need to start again. I want to be giving course corrections as early as possible, and that requires the having them willing to give you that.
Be brave. Be brave.
Yeah, and I remember walking into meetings and we'd be talking, and I'd express some opinion, and everyone would agree with me. And I'm like, I know this is a half-assed opinion that I just pulled out of nowhere. Everyone should not be agreeing with this, right? This is a bad sign, and always being on the lookout for that. I think people underestimate exactly how much of a halo founders wear in the company. There's often way too much pedestal going on. And so that becomes this endless, very active process of trying to work against that. And I guess it comes down to that servant leader as well, right? Your job is to make them effective at their jobs.
Yeah.
And make sure everyone's got the same vision and is pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, man. Just when you triggered in my head was, I don't know if it runs in the US, but there was a program I saw in the UK where there was this thing where the founder or the CEO would effectively put a disguise on, and then they would go back into the business and be, like in the front line, or they say it was a car dealership, they'd actually go and sell in one of the garages, or it's construction. They go and work with the guys that were doing the construction work, and the insights and the reality of of what was actually happening at the coalface, or on the shop floor, was just like mind blowing for that person. And then there was this big reveal where they kind of pull the kind of the mask off, and they go, "Oh my God, it's the CEO or founder or whatever." I don't know if they've got a version of that in the US, but
they did.
That's what I was triggered when you were talking. That was what I was just thinking about. It's a bit like that. Was
Undercover boss. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the one exception to, I was saying as the CEO, you're working on the business all the time and you shouldn't be hands-on. I think that's the exception, but that isn't really, you're not going hands-on to do the thing. You're going hands-on to get the truth about what's going on at that level. Right. And it's like skip levels and all of those things. How do you break down those bureaucratic things where it's not the only truth you're getting is, from someone who's carrying water for someone who's carrying water for someone who's carrying water, and it's getting diluted every time it goes up.
Yeah, we used to do skip level reviews in GE, actually, when I was in GE, when Jack Welch was there, actually, and they were brilliant. I mean, the visibility and just some of the people that we were being, I mean, one of my CEO, Chuck Piper, absolutely legendary guy, and it was fantastic. He fought in Vietnam. I mean, but we'd have like workouts with him, like just, I was in my 20s, and we were in with this guy who's in his 40s, 50s at the time. And, but they were all, they're all human, they're all, but then because it just kind of de-layered the organization, and everybody just got a lot more honest and authentic, and you felt like you could talk to him about anything, and stuff that you saw. It was just when I realized that it was a very powerful leadership technique there. It was And obviously, GE was is a huge organization, but those kind of things I think you never forget because they're just so impactful.
So what's funny, that inspired what I think I'm going to call my third piece of wisdom. Because you were talking about this guy's a bit on vet, and I've ended up working with a lot of guys in the government who were, multi-star generals or
Right.
combat experienced special forces operators and so forth. And a number of us in my company, we ended up coming up with this phrase. We said, anyone who says I'm the man is not the man. Because you when you meet a 3-star general or you meet these decorated, amazing high-end combat veterans, they never talk about it. They never brag. If someone's going to go, man, I could kick your ass, the one thing is they're not a real ass kicker. The real ass kickers don't say that. Right? None of that ever happens. They tend to be very modest, very quiet, and it's show don't tell, right? The proof is in the pudding with those guys. And
Yeah, exactly.
and I try to embody that. Like, I just, if you're good at this, that should come out. I hate these people who are like advisors or coaches, and they're like, I'm this amazing thing, and listen to me, and I'll do this amazing stuff for you. And that's part of why I do so much free consulting. Is, my goal is to find interesting people to have on as formal advisees for equity. That's kind of the business model here. But at the end of the day, take some free advice and see if you thought it was valuable. And if it was, follow me. That you feel the boot's the same thing. Like, you want to know what kind of advice I give? Here's hours and hours of it that you can go watch for free. And if you think that that's the kind of stuff that would be really valuable, come talk to me. And I'm happy to help.
You know what that triggered with me as well? Just thinking, Jocko Willink, the U.S. Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
So he's got a video on the internet. It's called Good. But he goes like, I've just broken my leg. Good. I've just lost my job. Good. I've got no money in my bank account. Good. And it's like, I think it's something like recalibrate, reload, get back on the field. It's just really kind of. And I was lucky enough to meet David Goggins in Dublin in February, who's another kind of obviously military character as well. But he's a bit more. You could say he's a bit more shouty than Jocko Willink, but equally inspirational and very authentic, as those people that have got that kind of background have and need to be. So yeah, great one. I agree with completely with that last sentiment. I'm the man. So yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing those nuggets and those pearls of wisdom. Brilliant. Very, very diverse and very, very, very great ones to finish this episode today. And
this has been fun. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. And I suppose for people that want to know more about yourself and what you do, and what's the best way to find you on that Tim Berners-Lee thing that was created back in the 80s?
Exactly. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Probably the best place to find me. I'm also recently been on Blue Sky. I've got my YouTube channel, Feel the Boot.
Blue Sky? What's Blue Sky then? What's that?
That's the Twitter competitor that's just come out.
Is it? Oh, really? All right. No.
Yeah.
Who's behind that one then?
The founder of Twitter.
Oh, Jack Dorsey.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, God. Here we go. Okay.
But
I thought you were going to say Donald Trump then or something.
No. I just thought I'd get off the burning ship before it sinks. And so Feel the Boot on YouTube. I've got all the content there. And of course, my website, which has links to the YouTube channel, all the episodes as blogs, and our podcast at feeltheboot.com.
Fantastic. Well, great. That's been Lance Cottrell, who is, I suppose you could say, the founder of Feel the Boot.
There we go. I'm the boot.
Yeah, exactly. Feel it in your backside. Yeah, and feel good about it. And that was Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Lance.